Kia ora e te whānau, nau mai haru mai ki te Rangatahi Kei Runga podcast. You guys know my ugly face and probably getting sick of me. And just to let you know, this is take 2 and I've only just pushed the record button, so sorry about that, Sarah. Anyway, just to all our viewers out there and our whānau who have been keeping up with our episodes on our podcast, just a big mihi to you all. It's always really refreshing getting your guys' messages and comments and supportive supportive gestures from you guys. So it's really cool, and it's cool to hear that some rangatahi out there are really responding to this. But I'm going to throw it to my main man, Dawson. How are you, brother?
I'm very good, brother. Tēnā koe hoa. I'm very excited about today's podcast with our special guest. But I'll let her introduce herself and her experiences. Tēnā koe, Sarah.
All right, I'll introduce myself again, this time hopefully to people who are watching and listening. But kia ora everyone, my name is Sarah, I'm 24, I live and have been raised in Manerua, still live here now, pretty much work here as well, and you'll have to stick around for this whole podcast to hear about the many, many hats that I wear, so that's me.
Awesome. Talking about the many hats, I feel like I'm repeating myself again, but I was doing some research, and I was looking at your Insta, I was looking at Facebook, I was looking at the Choice website, I was looking at, these things you're going to get into, but you were described as so many different things, like social innovator, social entrepreneur, businesswoman, rangatahi advocate, community advocate, and I'm guessing there's probably many, many other hats that you're wearing, but I guess a good starting point for us would be rangatahi itself and youth, and I guess looking at that portai, maybe share with us again, your experiences and insights working with young people.
Yeah, so my experience working with young people started when I was about 16. I was at James Cook High School, and I was getting involved. Shout out to our JC peeps, but I was just starting to get involved with lots of different community organizations, joining some youth groups and things like that in the community who were, just, out and about in the community. So that was my first exposure as a young person in doing kind of community work and community development and stuff like that. And it kind of progressed very quickly where I found myself, I came to the realization that I was really good at delivering events, which is why I'm a qualified event manager to this today. But when I was 16, 17, I realized, I'm actually pretty good at events. And so let me continue to do this and give back to my community. And so found myself as a 16, 17-year-old delivering these huge events that were supposed to go completely over my head. And I'm speaking like $10,000 community events,
wow.
Like massive workshops with and leadership conferences with 80 or 100 young people there. And so that was my first kind of exposure, going from a young person being surrounded by, youth groups and stuff like that, to actually being a young leader in, I guess, Manerua, and surrounding myself with all of these other rangatahi and trying to usher them through and things like that. I see that kind of as like the events and that little pathway is to that, the pathway that's taken me to the directions that I am in now. And so we'll fast forward a little, but essentially the long story short is I ended up getting elected to council when I was 20. So I finished up JC.
Ooh.
I decided to take a gap year, and I just loved serving my community of Manerua so much as a young person, as a 16 to now a 19-year-old, that I really wanted to do something more. I felt like I had peaked in what I could do for delivering events in my community, and that actually the next stage for me was to be at the decision-making table where important decisions are being made for, my community. And so ran in the election. I actually won, which was quite surprising. I got the last seat. So there's 8 seats on the local board, and I came 8th, which was incredible. So I campaigned as a 19-year-old and then won my election just as I had turned 20. And so that was that was kind of my exposure to Rangatahi was very short, but very quick as well. 16-year-old just wanting to get involved in a community and serve a community, to that being taken to another level a couple years later. I guess to continue on that, so I spent one term in Auckland Council. So one term is 3 years. So from 2016 to 2019, October last year, I spent as essentially a politician for Mainirewa, and then I made an exit out of there, and have been and am still involved with Rangatahi across Auckland on a regional basis now. And I'll talk a bit about that. Do you want me to talk about that now or later?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, I mean, just hearing you kōrero, and then for me, it's like I want to know why. Like, why did you decide to run events for community? Why did you decide to run for the local board? And like, what was the why behind it? Because you kind of talking about you've been doing this thing, you felt like you wanted to, but like, what's the real nitty gritty? Like, why?
I have always been saying it, and I will continue to say it. Like, there's just something about wanting to see young people flourish, be given opportunities to flourish, to find their pathways just as much as I did. That really gives me a drive to do these things. I like to think that, and everything that I do, in essence, is me trying to, inspire young people, two, me trying to prove to people that young people are just as capable of doing all of these things. Three, it's when I do these things, I always try and create an opportunity out of it for young people to either be huddled through. And what I mean by that is my short period of time spent in council was intentional, because for me, it was me putting my foot in the door, keeping it ajar for just enough for enough young people to come through and usher them through. And that was my time over. But in actual fact, there was now young people coming through in a succession as a result of me being in that space. So yeah, just my desire to just see young people flourish and succeed. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's so cool. Dos.
That's me. That's inspiring. Like, so for people that might not understand how council works, how do you like put your name forward to run a campaign, especially at such a young age? Like, I know at West Auckland, I don't think there's any 19-year-olds campaigning for the Waitakere side, but you've done it, so it is possible. So what are the steps that you took to get into council?
Yeah, so you just need to be 18 years old, so that's the minimum. The second point is you need to find $200. Unfortunately, that's always going to be the biggest barrier for a young person to run an election.
Yeah.
I was lucky because I had an older person who believed in what I was wanting to achieve, and also what I had been doing, who actually sponsored that for me. And I think there are a lot of young leaders in and across Auckland who have mentors that could easily be like, yes, I absolutely believe in what you're doing and want to do, and so I will happily sponsor $200. $200 is nothing to some people. To me, as still a broke 24-year-old, it's quite a bit. So yeah, the minimum is you need to be minimum 18 years old, because obviously that's the age to vote as well. But also, you need a $200, and then you just fill out the application form and get all the things. And so.
Okay, so that's the process. So the next step is running your campaign. Like, what's your strategy towards getting people to vote for you, especially being so young?
Absolutely. So you need exposure in the community, which is a big one. And to be exposed, you need money, which again is going to be another barrier for young people who are probably studying, got student loans, working part-time or casual roles, things like that. And so I had to pull a lot of money out of my savings towards my campaign, but also because of just the networks that I had built since I was 16, running all of these events, and all of the people that I had brought onto my side, essentially. When I put a call out for donations, they came so easily. Like, people really believed, actually, you know, we don't have a young person on the board. We don't even have a Pacific person on the board. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I'm Samoan, and I was actually the first Pacific person to be elected to the Manirewa local board.
Wow.
Which is incredible, but also that shouldn't be a thing, you know, like, you know, Manirewa has such a high Pacific population. It's like, it should just be a given that there should be somebody there now who is of, you know, who is Pacific Islander. But yeah, to go and campaign, you need exposure and you need funds to fund that campaign. And so I found myself buying a lot of billboards. So I painted Manirewa orange. And that's still the color of, you know, I'm going to talk about choice soon, but that's still a color that I've carried on, as this theme of orange. So I painted Manirewa orange. You know, young people are really into merch, such as the culture jumper you're wearing now, Jordan. And, you know, I bought out some jumpers with my face on it, saying, you know, Sarah for Manirewa, things like that. Young people are really into it. I not so much, now that I see the photo I used. And I just continued to do what I was always doing, which was just being active and visible in the community. For myself, it wasn't so much of an effort because I had been actively involved in the community since I was 16. And so going to community events, going to the Sunday markets, things like that, was a thing that I already was doing prior to the elections. But for a young person who might be doing campaigning for the first time, this will be a huge effort for them to have a Monday to Sunday schedule of, you know, got to go to the Sunday markets, have to go to this community event, have to go to this prize giving at this time, and then the same thing later that day, another prize giving. Yeah. Oh, and I did, which was actually the coolest part of it, was sign waving at the Clendon roundabout, which was really fun, actually. I made it a thing, and so that I had lots of young people with me for every one of those, and it was just a whole cool experience for all of these young people in their school uniforms, straight from JC, waving signs. I gave someone a megaphone, you know, and they were yelling things, and then someone was playing some music, and we were just dancing and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's more than pretty cool. That's like amazing. I think you know, it's a really cool, it's amazing what you did, that story, and how important it was for you as a 19-year-old. And you know, going into Auckland Council, was it daunting? Because I find, and you know, Dawson and I share a whakaaro that you know, we need to talk to rangatahi. Like, if anything to do with young people, you know, they're probably the starting point before we do anything. And for you to be 19, you know, at the table, representing not only your community but young people. You talked about being, you know, the first Pasifika person. Like, these are a lot of, you know, to go along with that hat, you're carrying a lot of people on your back as well. What is it about? You know, not to like put you, but like, why was it important that you were there? And what's important about like youth participation?
Just on that though, like, my joke is that all of those people that I carried is the reason why I have back problems nowadays. But so your question around why is it important for young people to be there, and you know, youth participation and things like that. I think it should just be a given that if you're in any community, any city, any space, any organization or business, if your business or organization or anything, if anything is going to impact young people in any way, it should be a given that young people should be not only involved in those conversations, they should be designing those conversations, designing the solutions. They should be at the center of all of those conversations that are going on. That should just be the minimum. Yeah. and that's not restricted to young people. I think that should also involve you know, any demographic of people. If it's if your work, if your Conversations are about them. If your work's going to impact them of any nature, that person should be in those conversations. It's not just restricted to young people. But young people are pretty important in our lines of work, because a lot of our work does impact them at the end of the day. And so that's a reason why young people should be at the tables of these discussions. And I guess tying onto that whole weight of carrying, all of that responsibility, that was huge for me during those 3 years that I was on there. I left council so exhausted. I felt like I had aged like 20 years. I was like picking gray hairs at the end of my term out of my head.
Wow.
And that's only because you're absolutely right. Like, I found myself carrying so much responsibility as a single person, single young person, having to, ensure there was cultural competency for not only myself, but for, Māori as well. I'm not Māori, but this is something that I'm learning and that I value. And so even having to speak that into the conversations and make sure that, are we bringing the right people into these conversations? Are we designing it correctly? Things like that. So much responsibility is what I was saying. But it's just really important that every single person, as I was saying earlier, who is going to be impacted is part of those conversations. And I'm biased because I value young people more. So I think that, absolutely, they should be at the center. So, yeah.
Your thoughts, Dos?
Nah, bro, you already know my whakaaro around that, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And you can't, that's valuable that you're there for your community. And I think about that all the time for Rangatahi, like when me and Joran have coffee and talk about the impact that we want to make with Rangatahi. We need to talk to Rangatahi. We need to have the Rangatahi at the table and design solutions for them, not design solutions based on what we think needs, because it's been a couple of years since I've been in the Rangatahi space. So what I needed as a Rangatahi has probably changed. But we don't know about their change if they're not at their table. So tautoko whakaaro that you just brought up.
And that's another thing that I guess that was a really hard part of being on council for me as well, was calling out when I noticed that things were just token or decoration. And those are really hard conversations to have and to explain to people why the thing they were doing was not authentic youth participation, or not authentic participation for any demographic group. And those conversations were really hard because actually more often than not, I was the only one who was calling that out, but also able to articulate that, because it was not a thing that my other board members were familiar with. And so I was kind of tasked with having those really hard conversations a lot of the time, and not being able to have my board members back me up or support me because they didn't, in actual fact, they were siding with the staff member because they thought it was authentic, and not placing any blame. But it is a learning process. Actually, it's a very long learning process to authentically involve young people. And it's one thing to know Hart's ladder. You guys know Hart's ladder. But to actually deliver on it is a whole conversation.
Just touching on those learning points, like what are just to wrap up the council talk, what are 2 learning points that you took away from the 3 years in council that have been that you've been able to transition into your next or your future, or how you approach your mahi now?
Oh, I had a lot of learnings. And why that is because I didn't have a nice exit from council. And I didn't mention that earlier, but actually I lost my re-election in October last year. And so there was a lot of learnings that came out of that. And I didn't lose for any one particular reason. But the long story short is I was bullied off the board, and was in a kind of limbo state where I had to stand as an independent. And I found myself kind of in this isolating experience, which was quite contrasting from my first time running an election to, you know, being second time running, being bullied, and it actually being a real public bullying, like it was in the media and things like that on social media. And yeah, so I had a lot of learnings. And I guess the first one would be that I know that council is not set up to have young people there. And I don't know if that's a good learning, but I learned that the hard way. Because at the start, actually, I would admit that like when I walked into council, I was a bit naive. And obviously I've matured very quickly in those 3 years and learned at the end, walking out beaten and bruised and just exhausted, that council is not set up to have young people there. And until there are structural and systemic changes, young people will continue to walk out battered and bruised just as much as I was, and tired and exhausted. And actually nowadays I find myself saying, not in a way to discourage, but actually just saying in a real way that I don't think you should run for council to young people who ask me. And that's merely because, as I'm saying, the system in which Auckland Council operates is not, it's not a safe space for young people to be there. It does not protect you, and it is not a space where you'll flourish. And so that was my first learning. My second learning is that you can get a lot more done on a grassroots level.
Kia ora.
Things take a long time in council, like years for just one thing to get actioned. And I witnessed that many, many times. In fact, things that I approved back in 2017, 2018 are only just coming to fruition now. It's like 3 years later. And I can't even be able to stand there and say, you know, I was part of making this decision because I'm not on council anymore. But essentially, I learned very quickly, actually, that I missed being on the ground, getting my hands dirty. I remember very distinctly in my first week of induction into council, I remember them asking, oh, what are you excited for the most? And I said, I can't wait to get my hands dirty. And they looked at me and kind of laughed. And I realized very quickly that actually when you're in a position like being a local board member, you're not going to get your hands dirty. The staff will fool you, but you're strictly governance, you're strictly advisory, you don't do any operational whatsoever. And as a young person who found her way onto council because I was getting my hands dirty, because I was grassroots, I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy sitting back and making decisions and then watching everyone else get their hands dirty. I really wanted to be on the ground, walking alongside young people, helping these organizations. But often I was getting my hand slapped, you know, get back out of there, because I was just like, oh, what if I just do this? But yeah.
I always feel like if I'm not getting in trouble, then I'm not doing enough. Like if I'm not getting growled or a slap on the hand or someone's coming to have a word with me, it's because I'm not shaking things up enough or being as disruptive as I need to be. So props to you, kudos to you for doing that, and you know, having the mana to be able to go to that space and then come back out and think, you know what, I took some learnings from that. That was cool. I take that experience. And one of the next things I wanted to talk about in terms of learnings, because it's been a huge learning for everyone in the country, actually globally, was COVID-19, and there was something really cool that happened during COVID that I want you to talk about. But if you can share about your COVID experience and then talk about this really cool initiative that you came up with that's turned into whatever it's turned into now, if you can share with us.
Yeah, so lockdown happens. This is me going to attempt to do the short story version. So like I said, I'm a qualified event manager, and I've had a side business, an event management business, since 2017. And as soon as lockdown hit, as we know, with a lot of businesses, not just myself, I lost contracts overnight.
Oh, wow.
And I lost income that was projected for the rest of the year. and was gonna get me my first house. Just lost overnight. And as we know, the events industry is still taking a huge hit as we speak. And so, yeah, I found myself very, very stressed, thinking, you know, what am I going to do with my business? Things like that. How is it going to turn out after the end of this lockdown? But I noticed that there was like a pivot in the event space, like people who were running events typically in person were starting to do online events. And I thought I could do that. And so how do I get more clients in this time who potentially want to flip their events into online ones without having to spend money on Facebook ads or Google ads, because I am incredibly stingy.
Yeah.
And as a small business, my pocket for marketing is very small. And so I didn't want to spend money on ads, is the long story short. And so through my research and looking at how people were pivoting and changing and adapting, I thought, why don't I just create a Facebook group that is purely for self-promotion and goes against the grain of what a normal Facebook group would do. And I say go against the grain because if you're not familiar with setting up a Facebook group, one of the default rules that Facebook provides is no self-promotion. Like, it's just a given. And so I thought, why don't we just flip that, not take one of Facebook's suggestions and just create a Facebook group that's purely self-promotion. And so I started this Facebook group, and it used to be called New Zealand Made Products. And it was the second week of lockdown I launched this. By the end of that first week, this Facebook group had over 10,000 members across New Zealand and the world, I guess. By the second week, it was 36,000. And then by June, so so just under 2 months, we hit 500,000 members, international and domestic members. So essentially the group is just a platform for you to be able to promote your business, your products and your services free of charge. You just post in the group, and you follow a certain template, which is under the rules that I have. And yeah, it went mental as I was explaining with the membership. Like, not only did the membership blow up, at one point in time, and it was around about the beginning of May, there were over 10,000 posts in the queue waiting to be approved.
Wow.
And I had 20 volunteers working 3 shifts, morning, mid, and PM, to tune out all of these thousands of posts essentially. So as of today, we are sitting on 540 something thousand members. 500,000 of which are all Kiwis, and then we have a very large portion, 22,000, which are from Australia, and then we have smaller amounts from the UK, and things like that. And it's kind of just like all the expats and the Kiwis that miss home and things like that. And then so I got this Facebook group. It's been around for 3 months, and then at the end of July, and actually before that, I had partnered with Indigo, this design and innovation company, which you guys know, Pat, is part of that. And I partnered with them to take the Facebook group to the next level, because I had been hearing through the thousands of people that they were like, why don't you create a website of some sort? And I was like, yes, I'll create a website, but I need money to do that, and time and employees and things like that. And so partnered with Indigo, and we rebranded the group at the end of July. We changed it to what we see now as Choice, with 2 O's, and we say 2 O's for extra awesome. But in actual fact, the person who owns choice.co.nz wouldn't give us the domain. So 2 O's for extra awesome. We rebranded the Facebook group from New Zealand Made Products to Choice. We also launched choice.co.nz at the same time, which is a marketplace. I guess you can liken it to Amazon or eBay or Trade Me, in which you can find pretty much anything. In this case, it's all NZ owned and operated businesses who have stores on Choice, and there's no listing or success fees. So any money that these businesses make on choice.co.nz goes purely back to them. In other words, I'm still broke. I'm still broke, 24-year-old. And we also do daily lives as well. So we launched all of these things at the same time and rebranded the group with no warning to the members. We were just like, surprise, this is new name, new website, all of these things, and you have to be on board. So yeah, that's where we're at today. In regards to the website, we last week had just had a huge milestone. We hit $500,000 on sales on the website.
Wow.
We're closing in on 600,000, and probably before the end of the year, we'll hit the $1 million of
Christmas
sales.
timing.
Yeah, it's going mental. So, yeah.
I'm like sitting here. I can't even fathom me. I can't. I'm like, what? How many? What? How many? And then the numbers keep growing and growing. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Bro, that's crazy. Dos, bro, what are your thoughts, brother?
That story is awesome. But I think it reminds me that one of my mates said that when you're broke, you're in your most creative state. Because he's got his own import-export business in Thailand. And he said, like, money makes you lazy. He said now he pays for things that he could do himself, but when he was broke and he didn't have that financial freedom, he got really creative, and that's how he got into his industry. And I think you just highlighted that, like you had just lost contracts, but you thought of this creative way to do something without money, and you've been able to turn it into something that's massive. And not only that, you've been able to help people, and that's inspirational for me. Like, it's like, man, that's awesome.
You went from like sign waving to almost 600K sales on the website.
Man, that choice, man. Like choice, double O choice.
Double O, extra awesome. that Dawson and I work in education, and we see a lot of positives and we see a lot of negatives with that. And particularly working with Rangatahi, what we tend to do in education spaces, in my words, we kabi hoa Rangatahi, and we say, hey, we need you to meet this criteria and these achievement standards so that you can go into these jobs over here in this industry. And me and the bro here, we just like, nah, that's not cool. We want our young people to be aspirational. We want them to be creative. We want them to be 19, sign waving outside James Cook High School. We want them to be creating Facebook groups. Some real cool, I guess, 3 pieces of advice to any rangatahi out there who are looking to become entrepreneurs or looking at business. What are some 3 pieces of advice you could give them?
All right. So I am a big believer in, and you close your ears if you don't like this. I believe that taking a gap year as soon as you finish school is really important. And let me explain why. You've spent all of this time in the education system, which is telling you to be a certain way, to go in a certain direction, to fit in this mold of society, please. But in actual fact, you haven't had any second to figure out who you are outside of your friends, outside of your family, figure out who you are as an individual. And I mean, even as we are sitting here now, it's going to be a lifelong journey of figuring out who we are as a person. But actually that time, taking that time after you've been in the education system is kind of like the first space or gap I see before you delve into the workforce and things like that and get stuck in this progressive loop. But essentially I took a gap year. I was actually supposed to do archaeology. I had been planning to do archaeology for a very long time, I know. And it was through me going out, I think joining a local community group and it wasn't even like an extracurriculum thing to me. Like I didn't think of it as that way. It was me like, I want to go join a local community group and get my hands dirty just because I really enjoy painting murals and things like that. And so let me just go live out this thing through this group. And actually that's the thing that kind of set in motion me finding out I'm good at events, and then me taking you know, realizing I could put archaeology on hold, go do event management later on in life instead. But yeah, I think that gap year is really important. Another,
Sorry. Can I just say, she said gap year, not gap years.
that's important. Yes, 1 year. It's really important. And I actually agree though, because we have to be disciplined to actually like, yep, okay, we've done as much as we can in this year. Because I do actually see a few people in my life who've turned that year into years and are still going on the years, still trying to figure out who they are.
Yep, decade.
Yeah. So a year. And yeah, I guess what else you would do is yeah, don't let that creative side of you die, eh? Like
Yep.
you can get so suckered into like the routine of life, which is like wake up at 9 or wake up at 6 and then work and then go to bed and then just like repeat. But actually we need to keep up some sort of creativity in our life, to continue to nurture that side of us that is like exploration and childlike and innovative and things like that. And that's not only important for like, you know, that side of creativity is not only important for like getting your hands dirty and things like that. It's actually relates to how you make decisions in your own life as well. And so if you can keep up that creativity, it subsequently helps inform the way in which you see life and the way in which you make decisions in your life. I guess another piece of advice is just do. Like
nice.
I do a lot of things. So as you can probably tell, I've worn a lot of hats and I've done a lot of things. And I haven't sat around making plans or thinking, okay, I'm going to do this and that and that. Or I can't start that yet because I haven't got the business plan done or anything like that. In actual fact, I've just taken that first step forward, taken another one, executed, and just do it. And once the snowball is rolling, you just got to keep it going with the flow of things. But essentially, you're not going to get anything done trying to wait on plans and things to fall into place or timing to come in and the sky to change color and things like that. You've just got to do. And actually, I guess I don't know if you said 3. I am going to do a 4th one.
Go for it.
But I love, actually, I don't love it, but I fail a lot. And I don't not solve. And the way in which I perceive failures or losses or falling over in my life, I see it as building character. And that's how I will continue to perceive those things, because actually I don't want to, I want to learn lessons from all of them. Actually, that's all I want to do. And the more lessons we can learn, the more lived experiences that we will have to be able to inform, again, our decision making. So if you can continue to do, you will continue to fail, but with those failures, you can continue to build character and help your lived experiences and continues.
That was me. And I think it's just the reality is that some people fail and give up. But we all fail at sometimes in our lives. And I think the most important key for what I'm going to tell you is that no one knows who they are at 20. Even at 30, I didn't know who I was, but I knew who I wasn't. And I think that's the main thing, you know, you try something, you do something. Man, I tried scaffolding construction. I'm not one of those guys. I found out week 2 into it. I was like, nah, that's not me. But you know, it's okay. It's okay to give up and quit and try something else. But that's life. It's a journey.
Exactly.
So, killed it.
Yeah, and that's just an example of you trying to figure out who you are, and you realize very quickly, actually, this ain't me. On to the next thing.
Hey, we usually do this thing at the end of our kōrero. Dawson has like quickfire questions for you to answer. But man, I'm glad we did this on a Wednesday, because honestly, the rest of my week is going to be so cool. I'm like happy as now. Like, man, that was such a cool kōrero. I've heard some very dos, man. You got our quickfire questions for Sarah?
Yep, I do. I've got well, I did have some advice, so I'll take that one up. But we've got 4 questions. The first one is your favorite bakery or spot to eat in Manitoba? Well, I've been hearing a lot from another social media influencer that Manitoba is the best place to eat. So, what's your favorite place to eat in your community?
Does it have to be a bakery, or is it just any?
Nah, any spot. It doesn't have to be a bakery.
So I am a regular of Yummy King Barbecue in Southmore.
Yeah.
You know, pork and rice and things like that. Otherwise, everybody knows Clendon Bakery. I mostly go there for the donuts. Actually, they have a chocolate and sprinkle one, which is so good.
Ooh. Nice to try them.
Yeah. Otherwise, I am also a frequent visitor of Bakehaven down in Clendon because they've got mean as fries, which you can only get if you buy like a combo. And yeah, so.
Spots. I've heard a lot about that Clendon Bakery. I'm gonna have to try it out. Someone who inspires you and why?
Someone who inspires me would be my parents. It's kind of like the standard answer nowadays, but actually they taught me from a very young age about servant leadership. Not like indirectly, actually, they taught me. I watched them growing up for a very long time serving, you know, just with full heart, without wanting anything in return. And so that's a big thing that I've applied to my life is servant leadership, which is why I do a lot of things that I do as well. I just serve as a way to give, not expecting anything in return. Yeah.
Mean. What's one takeaway from 2020, like in COVID? Like, what's one learning that COVID has brought on to you?
Obviously, anything can happen. So yeah, just gotta. Yeah, I don't mean nothing is guaranteed. Yeah, I don't know. Anything can happen at this point. We've seen it all this year.
And final question: what are 2 goals for 2021 for Sarah? 2 goals.
2 goals would be to obviously continue to grow the business choice, and you know, we're only 3 months in as an actual business, and we're already surpassing the goal of 500,000. So I am waiting in anticipation of what we'll be achieving at the 6-month mark, or even the 1-year mark. What goals we'll be passing, and I guess the second goal would be to invest a little bit more into my health and well-being, which you know, as people like ourselves who are always giving, we can always put our own health and well-being last. And so I would like to take some time to lose the weight I got from lockdown, essentially.
So no bakery visits then?
No bakery. Keto only.
Hey Sarah, before we sign off, do you mind sharing your socials and your website for our whānau out there?
Yes. So for my own personal ones, my Instagram is my name, Sarah Colcord. So is my Facebook page. Otherwise, if you're after Choice, it is choice.co.nz is the website, and the Instagram is ChoiceNZ. That's the handle, as well as the Facebook page for Choice is ChoiceNZ. Otherwise, if you're looking for the Facebook group, which is the main shebang, it is just called Choice. And remember, that's Choice with 2 O's. So.
Hey Sarah, on behalf of Rangatahi Kei Runga podcast, myself and Dawson really appreciate your time. All the kōrero and the hua, all the gems that you shared with us in this kōrero. Man, I don't know about Rangatahi, but I'm inspired. So, Brother Dos.
No, thank you for your time. I truly appreciate it. Really enjoyed this conversation. Really enjoyed hearing your story. Man, I wish you nothing but success from here on out. Like, you're an inspiration, not just to Rangatahi, but to our people, especially our Samoan people. So, thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Kia ora.
All right, I'm going to...